Hey there! Today we're learning about the British Romantics. This period lasted from 1798 to 1832. So let's see, how romantic are you? Put a finger down if the answers to life's most puzzling questions can be found through discussions with a simple person who lives in the country close to nature, not with a sophisticated, well-educated person from the city. Put a finger down if the answer to life's most puzzling questions can be found through a connection with nature. Put a finger down if the use of one's imagination is more important than rational, based on reasoning or fact thought. Put a finger down if subjectivity, which is personally biased, is more important than objectivity, unbiased. Put a finger down if knowledge is gained through gut reactions and subjective hunches rather than level-headed, objective, rational thoughts. Put a finger down if nature is more important than art. Put a finger down if experimental trial and error is a better process than the conventional scientific method. Put a finger down if poetry should be spontaneous and full of emotion, not planned and straightforward. Put a finger down if sensitivity, feelings, and spontaneity are more important than intellectualism. And finally, put a finger down if dare to be is a better motto than dare to know. So let's see, how romantic are you? Tally up your numbers. If you have 3 or fewer fingers, you're not romantic. If you have 4 to 5 fingers, you're sort of romantic. If you have 6 to 7 fingers down, you're highly romantic. And if you have 8 to all 10 fingers down, you're extremely romantic. Now, has your idea of the word romantic changed any way? If so, how? So Romanticism. The word romantic or romance originally referred to medieval tales of knights written in the original Roman language, Latin. These tales often included love stories between a knight and his lady, resulting in the modern meaning of romance. When talking about the Romantic era in literature, we are actually referring to romantic as freely imaginative fiction, and not romantic as in romantic love. Viva la Revolution. So in 1789, the French Revolution signaled a drastic change in European history. Society had begun a sudden, violent shift from traditional, rigid monarchies to more democratic systems of representation. America gained its independence from Britain in 1783. That's when the American Revolution ended. In 1794, the Reign of Terror immediately followed the French Revolution. After 30,000 public executions, the British government passed strict laws that further suppressed those likely to revolt: poor laborers, Luddites, and slaves. Now, you may ask yourself, why is this important to British Romantics? Well, it is because many of the British Romantics actually went and fought in the French Revolution. They fought for the freedom of others. Now, this is a very famous painting called Liberty Leading the People. It is by a French artist named Eugène Delacroix in 1830, and it really encompasses many of the belief system of our British Romantic poets. So why is this important? So like I said, many of the poets fought in this war. Now let's take a step back to the Age of Reason, which we just talked about, to understand the Romantic era. And many of you should remember Jonathan Swift, Modest Proposal, my favorite piece, and hopefully you enjoyed it too. So Age of Reason versus the Age of Romantics. So in the Age of Reason, writers stressed reason and judgment over and concern with universal experience and the value of society as a whole and the value of rules. This is important to the Age of Reason writers. In the Romantic era, writers stressed imagination over emotion. They stressed concern with a particular experience. the value of the individual human being, and the value of freedom. So what are the characteristics of the Romantic era? So we have the common man in childhood over urban sophistication. Romantics believed the natural goodness of human, which is hindered by the urban life of civilization. They believed the savage is noble, childhood is good, and the emotions inspired by both beliefs cause the heart to soar. Emotions over reason was very important. Romantics believe that knowledge is gained through intuition rather than deduction. This is best summed up by Wordsworth, who stated that all good poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Nature over artificial. Romantics stress the awe over artificial. Romantics stress that awe of nature and art and language and the experience of sublimity through a connection with nature. Romantics rejected the idea of the Industrial Revolution. The individual over society. Romantics often elevated the achievements of the misunderstood, heroic individual outcast. Imagination over logic. Romantics legitimized the individual imagination as a critical authority. So which of these characteristics of the Romantic era does this painting evoke? Could it be imagination over logic? What do you think? What about this painting? Nature over artificial? And what do you think about this painting? To the Romantics, nature provided the pattern on which to base their creative lives. The Romantic watched cities grew, industry prospered, and farming life declined. In an effort to reclaim nature, the Romantics made it a central force in their lives and their literature. Nature was celebrated as a source of delight, an image of love, and a model of moral perfection. So next we have 6 major Romantic era poets, and we are going to talk about these poets. And my favorite is at the bottom of this list. We're going to have William Wordsworth. He helped to launch the Romantic age. His most famous work is The Prelude, chronicles the spirit of life of the poet, has an interest and sympathy for the life and troubles of the common man. He is considered the nature poet by focusing on ordinary people in country settings. Now, it's important to recognize that many of these people were not common. They were actually wealthy individuals. William Blake, he started writing poetry when he was 12. Blake was a nonconformist who associated with some of the leading radical thinkers of his day. He rebelled against traditional poetic forms and techniques, and he valued imagination over reason, and he was Scottish. Lord Byron. He is probably one of the most famous of the Romantic poets. He indulged in excesses and had huge debts and many love affairs. His most famous creations are his dark heroes, called Byronic heroes, who, in fact, were not heroes at all, but stood out from ordinary humans as larger than life. It is known that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. She was spending the weekend or something in a castle with Lord Byron and her husband, Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron supposedly had, come up with a bet. Hey, I bet that I can write a scarier story than you two. And she wrote Frankenstein from that weekend. She won. Percy Shelley. Shelley had a very unconventional life and was very idealistic. He was also a radical nonconformist. He did not become famous until after his death. Then there's John Keats. During his very short life, he died at like 25, his poems did not receive favorable reviews by the critics. The poetry of Keats is characterized by sensual imagery, most notably his odes, and he is known today. He is the king of the odes. He got the odes down. Now, my favorite, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He was a poet and a critic, had anxiety and depression, possibly bipolar. He was an opium addict. His characteristics of poetry, mystery and supernatural nature, exoticism, and musicality of verses. And we are going to, I'd like to do 2 of his poems. One of them is extremely, extremely long, but it's a story in itself. So if we can't get to both, that's my hope. But we will definitely be reading one. And that is all.